Welcome back to the Space School, always known as PPSW, your favorite hangout place. Today we're back with another Star Wars story. Today we're doing what would have happened had Plo Koon survived Order 66. There's so many possibilities surrounding this, and we need to know, does he help the Jedi secure a quick victory, or do the Jedi lose their ground and allow the Empire to become more powerful? Is Plo Koon the one who can help the Jedi bring balance to the Force, or does he fail such as Obi-Wan and Yoda had? Before we get into this video, let's smash that like button and shoot for 2,000 likes in the first 24 hours, and I will release What If Anakin Went to Mandalore with Ahsoka. This is a video you don't want to miss. We are also gunning for 50,000 subscribers, so join the Space Gulag if you want to be a part of our amazing journey together. If you have ideas for videos, leave them down below. I do read all of your comments, but I don't do crossovers. And one last thing, if you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon, Twitch, and community Discord. Special shout out to George Story and Benjamin Wells for being Grand Tier supporters, and Jay Hoffman is a Master of the Tier supporter on our Patreon. Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. There's a massive video coming out at some point this week, so stay tuned for that. You guys helped bring that to life. If you want to learn how to win a free lightsaber, watch to the end of the video and I'll show you how. Our story begins as Plo Koon flies over the floating cities of Cato Neimoidia, trailed by two ARC 170s. The battle was almost won in one of the most important separatist homeworlds in the war effort. Cato Neimoidia was located in the deep core, surrounded by loads of Republic planets, though the Republic had been besieging the planet for months now. It was being besieged when Ahsoka was actually kicked out of the temple. Plo Koon had been sent by the Jedi Temple to finish the job and then return in time for victory on Coruscant. Plo Koon was rounding his troop movements to ensure the Republic was going to win victoriously. Most of the battle had been won. Minor pockets of droids were out and about, and him and his clones were out to scout them out and report them back to the larger army on the ground. Though there was something off. The Force felt more out of balance than ever before. Instead of victory on the horizon, he heard voices making their way through the Force. Mace Windu, Chancellor Palpatine, and Anakin Skywalker. Something was off. There was death in the Force, and he heard a scream of power. Something was wrong. Everything felt wrong about this. Plo heard Mace screaming out, and then Skywalker let go of his breath, with pain in his voice, asking what it was that he had done. And then, before it could get worse, Plo's instincts kicked in, as he whipped his starfighter away, and the two ARC 170s behind him opened fire. Plo dipped down as he flew under one of the hanging bridges and pulled back up as more fighters swarmed on his position. He used his comlink to try and contact his men, but they blocked all of his frequencies. Plo valued the lives of his men, and he knew he couldn't risk killing them. This had to be some sort of mistake, so he avoided them. Chaos was in his mind. He pushed his fighter out of the system with intense speeds, trying to avoid any ships that might be coming his way. When he exited the atmosphere, he saw two Venators bearing down on him. Plo then whipped his starfighter away as he veered off from the incoming capital ships. V-Wings and ARC 170s continued to chase after Plo as he turned away from the fleet. His Jedi starfighter was fast enough to escape them, but it wasn't likely that he would have to kill some of his men. Plo dreaded this idea, but it was a last resort for him. They cut off all communication with him, and they were trapping him. He was trying his best to avoid conflict with them, but they continued to pursue him. He would have no other choice. Plo's thoughts dwelled on his men. He worried for them, and why they were doing this. Plo also hoped that this was only on Cato Neimoidia, though the Force felt so out of balance he knew it wasn't. Plo turned his fighter around some rock formations in space. He knew he had to do something, and the closest hyperspace ring was near the two Venators that were bearing down on him. There were two of them, and he needed to get to one of these hyperspace rings. Plo knew that he was good enough of a pilot to do this, but could he do this without harming any of his men? Plo pulled his ship back and rolled it in between a squadron of fighters that were following him, avoiding blasters and of course avoiding smashing into one of them. Jerking his ship back and forth, spinning when needed, and avoiding combat with his men who had served with him for 3 years. As he flew towards the Venators that were still approaching, Plo flew over the main turbo lasers on the Venator-class Star Destroyer. As he whipped his shuttle in between the two bridges on the ship. The other Venator opened fire on that ship, trying to hit Plo, and actually destroying part of the ship. Plo bounced his ship back and forth as he glided over the engines. As he looked for the proper hyperspace ring to enter, he told his droid to turn both of them on and prepare both of them for hyperspace. Plo had one chance of this. If he missed and messed up, he could possibly die. Plo set his sights on one of them, as the Venator behind him opened fire with one of the few turbo lasers that was in range. The ship fired and fired until Plo whipped his starfighter back around into another hyperspace ring. Plo then shot off into hyperspace. as a trail of fighters broke off from the pursuit, and the clones helped the wounded inside of the flagship that was blown to pieces by the other. Plo leaned back in his cockpit. He didn't understand. How or why was it possible that his men could just turn on him, as if they hadn't served together for years? It genuinely broke his heart. He didn't know what to do, but he was en route to Coruscant. There was one place in the galaxy that would be safe for the Jedi, and that one place would be the Jedi Temple. But of course that wouldn't be the case when he arrived. When Plo Koon flew into the skies of Coruscant, he saw the smoke emanating from the Jedi Temple, and so he made his way for the hangar bays. It was daytime at this point, and there were 501st clones scoured across the temple itself. When Plo landed on the hangar bay platform, he saw several clones approaching him. They immediately raised their blasters, and Plo had to do what he needed to do to protect himself. Igniting his blade, demanding that the clones surrender, Plo got into a heated engagement on the hangar bay platforms, fighting off clones and blocking their blasters and pleading with them to stop this conflict. He knew that they shouldn't be adversaries, but they continued, attacking him still, blasting away as he defended himself from their attacks. Plo Koon pushed inside of the temple itself, but the shooting alarmed more men than he really wanted to face down. There were still random pockets of shooting. The few surviving Jedi were executed once they left their hideouts. The Jedi Temple, which held 10,000 members, now was crawling down to hundreds, most of which weren't on world, hiding out away from the clones who had just turned on them. Plo Koon continued as he searched for survivors as he cut down more clones. Plo Koon made his escape to the entrance and found clones wearing Jedi robes, a surprise to him at first. Their voices and faces gave it away as he cut through these clones as well, on the front steps of the Jedi Temple. These clones were stationed here to trick young Jedi who thought it were safe to return. There was also someone else who did this, and Plo had a feeling he knew, but it wouldn't take long until he was stopped in his tracks. He looked down before him as he fell hard to his knees. As he looked at them, a bunch of Jedi younglings slayed by a lightsaber. They were all dead, lying lifelessly on the ground. Plo felt as if he had failed. He couldn't believe this could happen, and even more so, he couldn't believe that the Jedi had failed. Plo's feelings told him that it wasn't failure to abide by the code, but it was a failure to prepare the Jedi's chosen one for some of life's difficulties, and that not Obi-Wan, but the Order itself had failed him. Plo sat quietly for hours as he looked around for surviving Jedi, and making sure that if any arrived that they weren't killed. Luckily enough, though, some younger Jedi Padawans made their way back to the Jedi Temple. They would have been killed had Plo not killed the security in front of the Jedi Temple. Plo was inside looking for holograms of the events when he heard a little voice call out his name. It was a child. Plo immediately asked if there were more, and there were, but they had scattered throughout the temple looking for friends, masters, and if any others had survived. The world of hurt that these kids were in was immeasurable, but Plo Koon immediately ushered himself to the young Padawan, picking her up and carrying her up to the Jedi Council chambers. He hadn't been there yet, but he assumed it was safe, and the surprise that caught his face was pain. While Plo Koon had a mask and eye covers, if he hadn't been wearing them, he would have been crying. Anakin had done something truly horrific, trapping the children who were trying to escape and hide, and then slaughtering them without mercy. Anakin knew no restraint. How could he do this? Plo took the kid in his arms away from the council chambers. He wanted to keep the kids away from what had happened here, but there was really nothing he could do. There was so much death everywhere. Plo hurt for the children. He felt like he had failed the Jedi, sitting on the highest council in the Order, and they failed. Plo couldn't focus on that now. He had to gather the young ones in the area of safety, and so he brought the Jedi Padawans to the Jedi archives, where there wasn't really a ton of slaughter. It was mostly clear, but he promised them that he would stay in the Jedi Temple with them. He just wanted to be sure that everywhere else inside of said temple was safe. Plo, then on the security, saw two hooded people walking towards the Jedi Temple. One of them was small, and that one could be Master Yoda, but because of the events, he wasn't sure. How could he trust anyone? Igniting his lightsaber, he walked out and demanded that the two remove their cloaks, and so, to Plo's pleasant surprise, it was Kenobi and Yoda, two of the other council members that Plo had served with. Kenobi asked Plo if there were any survivors. None were left inside of the Jedi Temple. but there were a few who returned, with the Jedi Temple requesting all Jedi back, saying that the war was over. The Jedi that responded to the message returned, though they would have been killed had Plo not been there. Yoda wanted to know how many of them were left. Plo then uttered the words, 9. A temple that used to have 10,000 members had 9 Padawans and 3 masters. Yoda shook his head down. Obi-Wan, though, was still unsure of who could have done this. Plo looked at Kenobi and then to Yoda. Yoda shook his head once more, and then Plo placed his hand on Kenobi's shoulder and told him the truth of Anakin's fall to the darkness. Obi-Wan's face was covered in shock. He wasn't able to process everything that Plo had just said to him. He looked down, a million thoughts crusading in his mind, but at the very forefront was his inability to train Anakin the way that Anakin needed. He knew that appointing him to spy on the Chancellor was a bad idea, but he thought that Anakin would be okay. If only he had killed Grievous faster, if they sent another master like Windu or Fistu to Utapau, maybe he could have saved Anakin. But that time was also not now. They needed to strike back. They needed to give hope to the galaxy. So, the 3 of them decided they needed to take on Sidious and Anakin simultaneously. Plo Koon, though, disagreed with splitting up. They needed to move as a united front and stick together as they took on the Sith Lords. Yoda understood where Plo was coming from, and Obi-Wan agreed. Obi-Wan told the 2 of them that the Padawans should stay in the restricted section so that no one that wasn't a Jedi Master could reach them. It would ensure their safety from Anakin and any other clones that would come to harm them. The 3 Jedi decided that they needed to face Palpatine, and that they needed to corner Anakin afterwards to make sure that he couldn't cause any more harm on the galaxy. The Jedi departed for the Senate building first. Palpatine was finishing his emergency meeting, a meeting that would crown him Emperor of the First Galactic Empire. It was time for the Jedi to strike. They needed to do so before the Empire grew to immeasurable power. Inside of the Chancellor's office on the lower levels, Palpatine sat quietly, amused with his success as he prepared himself to give Lord Vader his next orders. He then felt a disturbance. His darkness was voided when the true power of the light came through his office doors, and he was trapped. 2 of the Jedi's best, and Master Kenobi. Palpatine always doubted Kenobi, because within the Force his presence was tiny and extremely inferior compared to anybody else. And it really was true. Kenobi wasn't extremely naturally talented in the Force. He had to work very hard his entire life even to become a Jedi Master, let alone a Master on the High Council. Obi-Wan barely even made it through his trials as a youngling. His dedication to his craft and his hard work led him to become one of the most prominent members of the Jedi Order, yet Sidious never saw why that was. The 3 Jedi ignited their blades, taking the precautions that not even Windu took. They knew that Palpatine was the Sith Lord, though they did not know that he had killed off half the Jedi Council himself. The Jedi were focused on being careful in this moment. They needed to capitalize off of their defenses. Palpatine also needed to play the safe. Windu was a challenge, but Plo and Yoda were 2 of the best duelists in the Order. Rumor had it that even Plo Koon, the only Jedi in 850 years of Yoda's entire life, beat him in a duel. Quite a track record. Palpatine stood from his desk and ignited his lightsaber. He had lost his other one when it was thrown from his upstairs office during his battle with Windu. He looked down the Jedi and then targeted Kenobi. He was the easiest target out of the 3, and so Palpatine moved across the room with intense speeds. Kenobi was quick on the defense as he blocked forward and jumped back, allowing Plo and Yoda to jump in. Palpatine was in shock. He genuinely didn't expect Kenobi to block the attack. It was almost improbable that Kenobi was ready for such a movement. Not even Agan Kolar and Saesee Tiin were ready for it. Plo and Yoda danced around Palpatine as he pulled himself back, switching saber forms to meet Yoda head on. It was of the utmost importance for him to keep the Jedi at bay, as he made his way to an escape. He needed to escape, of course. Yoda bounced off the wall and jumped in front of Palpatine as Palpatine swung down, having to move back as Plo made an advancement, and Kenobi did the same, following in Plo's footsteps. Sidious pulled back as he tried to swing for Kenobi's stomach, again missing this time, but this time because of Yoda blocking the assault. Kenobi was lucky, but he wasn't going to die at the hands of a Sith Lord. Kenobi spun back as Plo moved forward for the kill. Palpatine was quick, but not quick enough, as Yoda sliced through the Sith Lord's legs. Palpatine toppled backwards as Kenobi jabbed forward, catching the Sith Lord in the jaw as he fell back, killing the Sith Lord. Sure, Kenobi could have done that for personal reasons, but the Sith had taken so much from him in the last 10 years. First, Maul took Qui-Gon, and then Satine, and now Sidious took Anakin. Sure, Sidious was responsible for all this suffering, but he was now dead, and the Jedi needed to act fast. Anakin would get impatient, and he could be lost amongst the stars if he was released. Obi-Wan told the other two Jedi that he knew how to find Anakin. The solution was Padme. But first, they needed to escape the Senate building before the clones and/or Senate found out that the Jedi had just killed the Emperor of the First Galactic Empire. The Empire would be in turmoil. It would be very much worse if Anakin were allowed to get on the loose. Obi-Wan told the other two that they needed to go visit Senator Amidala's personal residence. It was a secret between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Of course Obi-Wan knew, and Anakin knew that he knew. But they both always pretended that Obi-Wan had no clue about Padme and Anakin's relationship. It's just how Obi-Wan knew to tell Padme to keep an eye on Anakin while he was on Utapau. It wasn't just Obi-Wan that had Anakin's best interests in mind, of course. The tragedy of this Jedi trio is that out of anybody in the Jedi Order, the three of them always did their best to ensure that Anakin would be happy. It could be seen in glimpses throughout the Clone Wars themselves. Yoda wanted Anakin to have Ahsoka, and it was a great decision. Plo and Yoda saw it throughout the Clone Wars. Ahsoka made Anakin a very happy master. But as far as they knew, Ahsoka was gone. It wouldn't matter anyways. Anakin couldn't be brought back from the darkness. The Jedi showing up would only aggravate him. They needed to sedate him, and then give him time to recover. Of course, he had committed crimes, but the best case scenario was to sedate him and not allow him to continue rampaging. The trio assumed that if they could get to Anakin, they could stop him, and allow him time to recover. Their combined strength would be able to stop Anakin without having to hurt or kill him. Before they went to Amidala's residence, they made a quick stop at the Jedi Temple to pick up the now 11 Padawans left behind. The Jedi traveled to Amidala's residence and told her of everything that had happened. She couldn't help but believe him, though. There were terrified children, and there were 3 extremely pained Jedi Masters. They all wore it on their faces, and even the children wore the trauma of the events on their faces. Anakin had done a terrible deed against the Jedi, and he needed to be stopped. Padme only agreed with this because the Jedi said that they wouldn't kill him. It wasn't their goal. They knew that he was conflicted, and it was their fault for such a conflicting emotion to happen within Anakin. Padme told the Jedi to get aboard of her starship, because she was going to take them to Mustafar to stop Anakin. Padme had her own plan, though. She always did, and she didn't want the Jedi to know of it. When the ship landed on Mustafar after a long journey, the Jedi Masters were consoling their students, making sure that they were okay. But when the ship landed, Padme exited immediately, wearing a robe of sorts and a hood over her head. In her right hand, she hid a small object. Anakin came running to see his wife, and they locked arms with each other. Anakin was worried why she was here. Anakin didn't know that Palpatine had died yet. In his mind, he was still alive. Hence why he was still waiting for orders to come in regarding his next mission, when all of a sudden, he felt a sharp pain in his ribs. He force-pushed Padme by instinct and saw a dagger sticking out of his ribcage. Before Padme could collide with the ground, she was stopped by the Force as Plo Koon lowered her down to the ground gently, before jumping off the ramp to stand in front of her. Anakin was enraged as he saw Yoda and Kenobi on the ramp to the starship. Anakin lifted his hand as he faced down Plo Koon, who ignited his lightsaber. Anakin with his hand tried to choke Plo, and then realized that Plo Koon was much too powerful to allow that to happen. Anger filled Anakin's eyes and heart. He knew he couldn't beat all 3 Jedi. He looked at Padme, who looked at him in fear as Obi-Wan went to get her inside of the ship, as Yoda walked down the ramp, igniting his emerald lightsaber to face down Skywalker. Anakin had 2 options: fight or flight. Anakin, of course, chose the latter, as he used all of his might to force push the 2 Jedi Masters as he turned and ran. Plo got back up and chased after him, as Yoda warned Plo not to do so. It was an erratic move on behalf of Plo Koon, but he couldn't let Skywalker escape. Yoda then followed, using the Force to guide his movements into speed. Anakin ran towards the ship on the other landing pad as he turned around, igniting his lightsaber to try and catch Plo Koon off guard. Plo blocked the attack as Anakin tried to beat back the Jedi Master. Anakin saw Master Yoda coming and then pushed off of Plo and continued to run as his cape floated behind him. Volcanoes across the world exploded as Anakin got to his ship and took off, abandoning R2-D2. Plo caught up, but it was too late. He didn't have a tracker, and even if he did, Anakin was too far away to be tracked. Anakin went to look for Sidious. He needed help, and he needed guidance from the dark side. Palpatine obviously lied to Anakin, but Anakin was going to play his little game because he needed his knowledge. He had to beat the Jedi because it was obvious that they had corrupted Padme. Of course, Anakin in this state of mind was essentially insane. He wasn't Anakin, and he wasn't Vader. He was an unhinged middleman between the light and the dark. His journey took him back to Coruscant, and then, when he realized the Jedi had killed Palpatine, he needed to tell Mustafar to crown him Emperor of the Galactic Republic. And so, without hesitation, Mustafar did it. Before the former hero of the Republic gallivanted off looking for knowledge of the dark side. On the other side of things, the Jedi got Padme to the planet Polis Massa. It was a close system to Mustafar, so they decided it would be a good target. It would be just in time for Padme to give birth to twins who she would name Luke and Leia. With 3 Jedi Masters and a handful of students, the Jedi told Padme that they needed to get off-world and train the children so that they could someday defeat Anakin. Before all these events happened, Anakin agreed with Padme that the Jedi would never train their children. Being that Anakin was now the face of evil in the galaxy, Padme decided that it wasn't worth keeping their children away from the Jedi. If they had any chance in stopping him, they needed the power and the blood of Anakin's children. They would be powerful enough to stop him. Anakin decided that to find the knowledge that he sought, he needed to travel to an ancient homeworld of the Sith, Korriban. So that's exactly where he went. Even though he didn't have a clear mind, he did know where it was that he wanted to go and what he wanted to do. He was the most powerful being in the galaxy, and his ego was taking over him. His journey to Korriban was quick, as he landed outside of the ancient Sith temple. He looked at its grand structure as he sized it up and willingly moved forward. An unknown path that could be his power or his failure. Anakin pressed forward as he entered the ruins of the Sith temple with an unbalanced mind. Inside of the Sith temple, he was vulnerable. His mind was a raging fire as he stepped past tombs of the most powerful Sith in all of existence. Bane, Nihilus, Malgus. It kept going as he walked past one of the tombs, where the coffin itself was left open. This caught Anakin's attention as he marched over to it, his boots kicking up the sand and dust on the temple floor. When he walked over to the tomb, he saw rotting bones of the corpse of a Sith Lord named Exar Kun. He was one of the great ancient Sith. Anakin read the tombstone and then saw a lightsaber. He was ready to inherit the powers of the dark side, and so he grabbed the lightsaber from within the tomb and pulled it out. He ignited the blade of crimson and examined it, and then, without a blink of an eye, Anakin was no longer in control. The souls of the ancient Sith Lord took over his body, as Anakin himself became a viewer, captive inside of his own body. Exar was just as shocked by this as he resumed power of mobility. Anakin's fragile mind, with no clear resolution or destination, was absorbed by the power of darkness. The most ironic part about Kun's stealing of Anakin's body is that he was once a former Jedi as well. And while leaving the Order was a quest for more power, he and Anakin were very much so alike. This made their bond even stronger, though Anakin had no control. Exar Kun now had a vessel, a body of the most powerful being in the galaxy, in prime position to shape such galaxy in any way possible, in any way that he wanted to. The Jedi knew that they had to allow Padme and Bail free range to command the Imperial Senate. They needed to take the remaining Jedi into hiding. Plo Koon's final message at the Jedi Temple could only be changed and accessed by High Council Masters. and because Anakin wasn't one of them, he couldn't access it. Though there was one more trick. The signal that was inside of the Jedi Temple said for all members to return, while the galaxy-wide one told all Jedi to go to the planet Tython to reunite with Kenobi, Koon, and Yoda. The remnants of the Jedi Order would slowly regroup, but in terms of Jedi Masters, the only three were the trio that liberated the Jedi Temple and saved the few Padawans who showed. Most of the older other Jedi died trying to protect their Padawans from legions of clones, and those who survived because of their masters weren't guaranteed safety because many of those Jedi perished at the hands of their own clones. The clones were killing machines, and when the switch in their head went off, anyone who went against them was to be killed. Many of the Jedi who appeared on the rebuilding grounds on Tython were traumatized. Many of them didn't want to see action again. Many of them were broken and out of balance, sitting between light and dark. The Jedi Masters had to do what they couldn't for Anakin, for their new order, or it would be ripped apart by the darkness that was now consuming it. Though there were two Jedi that the three Masters knew they had to keep a close eye on, and that was Luke and Leia. The children of Skywalker could very well be imbalanced. With Anakin as Emperor of the Galactic Empire, he would return to Coruscant with the soul of Exar Kun inhabiting him. He would go back and assume the role of Emperor with great pride. He also stampeded around the Jedi Temple in victory. Exar Kun realized how truly powerful Anakin was, and he wanted to take advantage of such power, but he also wanted to prove to the galaxy the full might that he had. With an army under his control, he would search the galaxy for more Force adepts to join his ranks. Exar was from a time before the Rule of Two, and now, like a true Sith Lord, he would build himself a Sith army. Exar also began to make an example of planets across the galaxy whose senators denounced the rule of the Empire and his status of Emperor. The first and closest planet was Alderaan. The Sith Empire had ravaged cities of Alderaan before, but now they were going to be leveled without mercy and without reason, and so, immediately, the clone army was dispatched under the leadership of Exar Kun as he ravaged the planet of Alderaan, reducing the cities to ash. Clone troopers who didn't want to obey the orders to execute families, civilians, or leaders were killed on sight, and their replacements finished the job. Many of the clones with their inhibitor chips still active had no issue with this, but the few who saw the wrong in the actions of this empire never lived to tell the horrors of what they encountered. With Alderaan leveled to the ground and Bail Organa dead, the clone armies moved to the Outer Rim, where the planet Naboo stood. Padme Amidala was leading a coalition against the Emperor, and with the death of Bail Organa, the Imperial Senate began to pick sides, most of it based on fear, but the rest based on reaction, though there would be challenge for Exar Kun when he and his armies marched on Theed. His men had reported a sector to be not clear, as over the comlink he heard men dying in the swing of a lightsaber. While the senator of Naboo wasn't present, Exar Kun was about to make the planet beg for mercy. With the Gungans already wiped off the face of the planet, and the people of Naboo were on their way to be next. ATTEs marched through the city, crushing any building that stood, as clones killed the running civilians. It was a masterful execution, and Exar, who stood atop of an ATTE, watched it all with glee. Anakin, though, on the inside, was in pain from watching this. He couldn't believe what he had done. He only wanted to save Padme, and he was just deceived by a lie. He wished he could take it all back. It was all tragic and painful. Just watching a city he fell in love with be torn to shreds. But to his shock, he watched from inside Exar as he departed the battle and entered the hangar bay. Several clones were cut to pieces, but in front of them were executed pilots and militiamen. Exar then heard the ignition of a lightsaber, and when he looked over, it was an amethyst-wielding Jedi. The former master of the Order, Mace Windu, had survived as he lunged into the air. Exar whipped out his crimson blade as he kneeled back, lifting his blade over his head. Mace knew something was off the moment he saw Skywalker. He knew Skywalker was a traitor and intended on killing him for what he had done to the Jedi and the Republic. But there was something awry with Skywalker. Even more so, the lightsaber and fighting style wasn't his. In the short few weeks since the fall of the Republic, it were completely unlikely that someone, even as talented as Anakin, could learn a new saber form and equip themselves with a new lightsaber blade. Mace engaged Anakin with ferocity. Even with a robotic forearm, he was still a master duelist. Anakin fought back Windu with great power. The skill of Exar Kun hadn't been tested until this duel. He was finally getting used to his body and his new powers as he confronted Windu and pushed him back. The duel was fierce. Windu obviously had a reason to win this duel, even more so because of what Skywalker had done to 2 planets already. Exar fought back, and his power was unmatched as he grew more and more powerful ever since the duel commenced. Mace was talented, as he used Vapad to fight Vader. The duel toiled back and forth as clones outside the hangar continued to level the city, eventually executing the child queen in the middle of her courtyard surrounded by her protectors, who were also executed. Mace swung his blade back and forth without using the patience of a true Jedi, and the former Jedi, Exar, saw the moment to strike. Anakin on the inside had his distaste for Windu, but Windu was right in this moment, when Anakin was actually wrong. Sure, it wasn't the Jedi way, but it could have stopped all this carnage. Anakin just hoped that Padme was okay in this moment. He didn't know if she was still on the planet or not. Exar found the sweet spot as Mace swung his blade across. Exar steamrolled his blade into the stomach of Windu, catching the Jedi Master by surprise. Windu looked with shock in his eyes as Exar smiled as he slit the body of Mace Windu into halves. As Mace toppled over, Exar drove his blade into the face of Windu as he carried on with the assault. The city was burned, the traitors were executed, and the civilians were left for dead as the cities burnt to the ground, with no way to escape. The worlds across the former Republic began to fear what could be done by this new emperor. Sure, Palpatine was unhinged, but Exar Kun was a force to be reckoned with within the galaxy that was growing with more and more power every second of the day. People both feared this power, but they also now wanted to rise against it. The Jedi were lost. They could possibly kill Anakin, but if they failed to, it would mean the end of the Jedi Order. With no masters left to teach, it was very possible their race would be extinguished from the galaxy if Obi-Wan, Plo, and Yoda went to face Exar. A few more worlds over the next couple months would be destroyed. Bothawai, Mandalore, and Mon Calamari were amongst these planets. The Jedi knew they couldn't stand by and let this happen. By this point, their ranks had grown, with the likes of Ahsoka Tano joining them as one of their most experienced members. Padme Amidala was also hiding in Tython, after her world's population went from billions to hundreds. Exar Kun was the face of pure evil in the galaxy, and his power would remain to be unmatched. Though pockets of rebellion would begin to rise, looking to be guided by the Jedi, they stood up to the tyranny of the new Empire. They couldn't just stand by, and neither could the Jedi, who were trying to figure out how to mobilize against Skywalker. Of course, raising Luke and Leia was destined to succeed against Anakin, but could the galaxy afford to wait that long? Anakin was ravaging through planets in weeks. Clones were fighting and removing themselves from combat and otherwise unhealthy solutions. Garrisons were combined together to stomp on civilian uprisings. Every time people rioted or protested against the rule of Anakin Skywalker, their planet was completely reduced to ash. The Jedi couldn't allow this, and they certainly couldn't live with it. They had to make do with what they had. They had some knights, but most of their order was Padawans or younglings. Of course, the Jedi knew they needed to act. The people on Coruscant were beginning to protest, and with senators dying left and right, it was completely plausible that Exar would go back and glass the entire city of the capital. If Exar did that, it would completely cripple the galaxy, and the darkness would consume everything. The Jedi needed a plan, and they needed to act fast on that plan. Exar was powerful, but that power could be used against him. Obi-Wan knew how to beat Anakin, but not beat Exar. The Jedi Masters eventually had no idea that Anakin... The Jedi Masters actually had no idea that Anakin wasn't in control. They had just assumed after their showdown on Mustafar that he lost his mind. And truly Anakin had. He couldn't believe what he had done. Being able to watch the carnage broke his heart. Anakin, the real Anakin Skywalker, couldn't live with what Exar had done to the galaxy. The weight to bear was too much. And then the briefing came in. The capital of the Empire was rioting, and with little inquisitors at his disposal, Exar and his fleet made their move back to Coruscant. Meanwhile, the Jedi were already on the planet, as many of them as there were. Even a couple Jedi Masters who were unconfirmed dead, one being a Togruta Master Shakti, and the other one being the Zabrak Master Eth Koth, who was barred from the Jedi Order. The Jedi were ready to take on the likes of the Sith Lord, the last Sith Lord. As the Imperial fleet arrived and the gunships deployed, they began to enter under heavy flak. While the Coruscant Guard was the only battalion on Coruscant, they were the clones who would betray Exar Kun to serve the likes of the Empire itself. Commander Fox, who was extremely loyal to Palpatine, couldn't let Anakin get away with taking the throne. There was no loyalty in an army built for the former Republic. The clones sided with the people they served to protect, and much like their ease to betray the Jedi, the Senate enacted Order 65 to have the Supreme Chancellor, or in this case the Emperor, removed from power. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The Jedi who returned the Coruscant while Anakin was gone were able to rally the Senate. There was only one chance to stop the spread of evil in the galaxy, and that was now. They had to strike back. The fate of the galaxy was reliant on this mission. LAATs rained down from the skies to beat the population back. With the Coruscant Guard aiming anti-aircraft cannons at the LAATs, they stood little to no chance as they flew down from the skies. On the other hand, Exar Kun jumped from one of the gunships as it was crashing as he landed before a group of citizens and clone troopers alike. Exar had no regard for life. He was the true nature of the Sith, full of a lust for power and passion for strength. He preyed on the weak, and this was his moment as he flashed his lightsaber and spun into attack position, killing civilians as the Jedi ran to stop the evil Sith Lord. The body of Anakin Skywalker was a painful sight for those who were close to Anakin. It was even sad for the citizens who saw him as a hero months beforehand. The Jedi lunged into the air, Ahsoka, Kenobi, Plo Koon, Yoda, Shaak Ti, and Eth Koth, ready to take down this menace in the galaxy. The citizens charged the clones, who had survived the barrage of flak during their landing sequence. They pushed forward, guns ablaze, still loyal to the true Emperor of the galaxy. These men hadn't received Order 65, and they were still fighting Order 66, whereas the clones with Order 65 were staying loyal to the Jedi who fought beside them. A massive battle ensued as civilians fought the clones who once served them, and the brothers fought brothers in a war of the inhibitor chip codenames. Exar struck first as he swung his blade. Anakin from inside couldn't bear to watch his friends die. Eth Koth was the first one to go as he tried to fight the overpowered Sith Lord. Ahsoka bounced back as Kenobi pushed forward. Anakin from inside his body watched as Kenobi got sent into a wall by Force lightning, and his apprentice was injured before his eyes. Plo Koon clashed blades with the powerful Sith Lord, as Yoda used the same tactic against Exar as they did to kill Sidious. Yoda stood no chance as he was grabbed by the Force and thrown into the air. Exar shoved Plo back as he almost landed the killing blow on the Jedi Master, as a blade came in to save his life. Shaak Ti was there to defend Plo. Kenobi rose from his pain and jumped back into attack position, as Exar jumped back, forcing his head down as he kneed Kenobi in the jaw. Ahsoka with one arm pushed her attack when a little green lifeform came crashing down on her from the sky. Plo got to his feet as he stood side by side with Master Shaak Ti. They looked down Skywalker, then from one behind the Sith Lord, Commander Fox placed his pistol to the back of Exar's head and pulled the trigger. Exar was released from the body, screaming as his apparition could be seen leaping from Skywalker's body, as Skywalker himself began to glow, as if he was released from the clutches of evil. His body, that lay in the middle of the ground on the Coruscant floor, disappeared before Shaak Ti and Plo Koon, who then looked at Commander Fox. They were all puzzled by this move. Fox had never been the most fond individual of the Jedi, but he proved his allegiance to the former Republic and to Palpatine with this action. To Plo and T, it was evident that Skywalker was possessed by an unknown force. As the Battle of Coruscant waged on, the Jedi aided in routing the traitorous clones and forcing them to surrender, though most of them wouldn't. Those who did would be given a fair trial after it would be revealed that their actions were caused by inhibitor chips, which the Senate understood after executing Order 65. The Jedi contemplated moving back to Coruscant, but they decided that they should exist away from the Republic, which was re-established and rebuilding. The Jedi Masters who survived the Clone Wars veterans would come back together to help rebuild the cities and planets that were mostly destroyed. As for Anakin, he would be remembered as a man cursed by the Sith, rather than a war criminal that erased planets off the map. With Padme winning a close election, a law would be brought into order, barring the Sith from existence. The Jedi were allowed to exist amongst the public. Republic war vessels would be directed to destroy Sith temples across the galaxy, and as for the Jedi Temple on Coruscant, it would be destroyed, and the Sith Temple under it would share the same fate. The children of Skywalker would grow as Jedi, but be allowed to live with their mother, pending their choices as an adult. they would opt to live with Padme, where both Luke and Leia would become proud leaders of Naboo, as she rebuilt herself and her planet from the ashes. As for the Jedi, they would struggle with their tarnished reputation, but the seeds of hope would be seen as reconciliation for the crimes of the Chosen One. The galaxy itself would rebuild in an effort to chase the peace it lost when the Clone Wars began. It would take decades, but peace would find itself refuge inside of the galaxy, with the Force wielders of the galaxy kept out of the public eye, only seen committing acts of service and love for the betterment of the galaxy. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is our story. Again, special thanks to George Story, Benjamin Wells, and Jay Hoffman for supporting the channel. Let's hit 2,000 likes on this so that we can see what if Anakin went to Mandalore with Ahsoka. If you want to see a what if, let me know down below. I do read off your comments, but again, I don't do crossovers. Check out the Twitch community, Discord, and Patreon if you want to be a part of our community or support me in other ways. This is how you win a lightsaber. Go down below in the comment section. I have a pinned comment that has a link to a Google Doc. Go click on the Google Doc and write your name down below. Just obey the instructions on the document, and that's all you have to do. In other words, let's get back to our story. Let's talk about the story itself. A very interesting story. Obviously, I obviously think that if Plo Koon was with the other two Jedi and they decided to take on Palpatine, it would have been an easy competition. As for them fighting Anakin, it could have been a really short story, but I didn't want that. I didn't want it to be a short story. I think Star Wars Theory did something similar like that, where another Jedi came back. I think it was Yoda, but Yoda went to Mustafar and fought Anakin with Obi-Wan, and obviously Obi-Wan and Yoda beat Anakin. I didn't want to do that. I wanted Anakin to escape. I thought Anakin escaping would lead to a more interesting story, and I think it did. And I think I've never really done this before, having a soul inhabit, I don't think I have a soul of a Sith inhabit the soul of a Jedi. And I thought Exar Kun would be a good choice. Obviously Revan was another choice, but I didn't want to do Revan. I want to save Revan for another time. But I think having Exar Kun would have been an interesting choice, because he was a very powerful Sith Lord and he craved power, but he was also much like Anakin. He was a Jedi before he became a Sith. And so I think that relation there would have been even more so present, and I guess ironic in this situation. But I think Exar would have craved more power, and I think he would have been as reckless as a Sith Lord as any Sith Lord, obviously. I toiled between choosing Nihilus or Exar, but I thought Exar would be a better choice because I didn't want Anakin to become a wound in the Force. But as for the end of the battle, the big battle, I drew a lot of inspiration from the original concept art for Episode 9, Duel of the Fates. That was a huge inspiration for that. I love the idea of having a riotous population on Coruscant try and take down the established power, and the established power in this situation isn't all that established. And while it might seem unrealistic for a new empire to crumble within months of being reconstructed, I think it would have. Even though Palpatine had all the people in the right places, Exar would have removed those people from power. He would have assumed complete power of the Emperor's name, and I think Exar himself would have been really malignant towards anybody that opposed his power, and I think he would have killed anybody who opposed him, because that's the Sith way. And in the end of the battle, there weren't really any Inquisitors. I mean, there were like maybe 2 in my mind, and I don't think they would stand a chance even against the civilians. Most of the Inquisitors were pretty weak anyways. They were not really all that good at doing their job. So, unless their job was Padawans, which most of them were. Anyways, though, I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was a fun, interesting story that went in a much different direction. But, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. Anyways, guys, if you did, do the things. I love you all. Spread the love, my friends, and always remember, may the Force be with you.